In this module, we're going to introduce several new commands that we've not used before. Everything that we're going to do in this module will be in the IDE. Now there's some things that you could do outside of the IDE to prepare your data and things like that, but in general we're going to be working in the IDE when we're doing any of the Python functions. So we're going to work with several different commands. Some of them will appear to be coupled together and they work in unison, and that is true. And others of them will appear to be somewhat disjointed. And then there will be some commands that we'll talk about that are just sort of generalized, such as deleting your variables at the end of your script so that they don't play roles in other scripts and things like that. So those are just some common good practices. We're going to work with something known as the cursor command, and the cursor command basically works with data within your table. We're going to work with our project files, so that file that contains all our information or points to all our information, such as it contains notebooks, it contains layouts, it contains our different maps that we might be working on. So we're going to work inside that project file, seeing what's in there, how you move things around in it without being actually in ArcGIS Pro. Now you may have to go into Pro to do some work on preparing your project files so that it has all the content that you need, but then you'll have this project file that you'll be able to work with and things like that. And then we're going to work also with exporting data. So when we're talking about exporting data, we're talking about static maps, not dynamic maps. So not shipping off a layer to something like ArcGIS Online where we can then work with it in a dynamic fashion. We're looking at that static map that you might create that has a directional arrow, it has a legend, has a scale, has a title, a name block of who created the information, but it's a static image that you might use that image in a presentation or in a report or in a poster. So there's different ways that you might be using that static image. Obviously, it doesn't have the same dynamics that you would have with a dynamic mapping program, but it still does have a lot of useful information that can be put into a printed report or into a PowerPoint presentation. So those will be some of the things that we'll be doing in this module. Again, there are segments that couple together. There are segments that are completely unique from the other segment. We're going to do our Python coding in our IDE, but we may have to use things like ArcGIS Pro to prepare our data so we can work with it, or to look at the results of our data, we may need to go back to ArcGIS Pro.